Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. I always thought that I am, at times, maybe a little bit obsessed with the future. I mean, sure, maybe 80% of my watch list is like post-apocalyptic shows and movies, but that's not the future I'm talking about. I'm talking about my profession, about comms and marketing, and what's coming our way. So I do pay attention to technology and its impact on our work, our jobs, and our lives. And I look for ways to make tech work for me. And I get excited when I think I'm onto something. And maybe that's why generative AI has been like a steady drip of Adderall. I can't stop, just can't stop. But anyway, my point is that where some quote unquote serious people see just another bright, shiny object, I see potential. I see more and more dots to connect. And then it's my mission to connect them. Maybe that's what obsession really is. But at least I can say with 100% certainty that I'm not alone. My guest today shares my particular affliction and has in fact built his career on it. From his early days in broadcast TV, followed by success after success at leading agencies, he's been first and foremost an innovator and digital pioneer. His accomplishments are legion, and recent accolades include the Provoke Media Innovator 25 and 2 consecutive appearances in the PRWeek Dashboard 25, much like a certain podcast host. Excuse me. He's delivered over 100 speaking engagements and remains in high demand. In his own words, he's obsessed with maximizing conversion and engagement at the evolving intersections where tech, brands, and audiences meet. In fact, if he hadn't said that, I might have stolen it and used it for my own branding. Please welcome to the show, my friend, the Chief Digital Innovation Officer at MSL Global, Rob Davis. Rob, it is very good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. That is great to see you. Great to be here.
We've obviously been talking a lot over time. And look, full disclosure, Rob and I were both on the Dashboard 25. That's how I met Rob. But I was really introduced to Rob because his firm, MSL, was my agency of record at my last job. And, not saying that I was particularly Rob's client, but I was Rob's client. So, we met that way in that context, but we just hit off friendship. And I tell you, every time Rob walked in the room in a meeting, I was like, that's the job I want. Like, that's the guy. He has this purview and this overview to like look at what is coming and to make it matter and to make it count and to make it relevant to his clients, to people in the room, to anybody he talks to. But not only does he like try to make that happen, he understands the connection, the narrative that connects those pieces to business, to the consumer, to the audiences, as he says in his own words, that intersection of tech, audiences, and brand. And I know that many of you out there may not be familiar with Rob, and if you aren't, shame on you. But if you're not familiar with Rob, I want to give Rob the floor a little while to just give an overview of where you've been and some of those legion of accomplishments that I glossed over in the intro, because there's some really cool things in there, and just set up the stage for our conversation. Can you do that for us, Rob?
I'd be happy to. I mean, Dan, I in a professional manner, I think of myself as one of the luckiest people in the world.
Yeah.
I came out of college at a time in the early 90s when everything was starting to change, right? And everything I was passionate about, music, photography, video, storytelling, all individual passions all of a sudden had a place to go. And I've just kind of let the industry take me along. And I've been very fortunate. I was able to jump on the early days of the print industry, being drawn to the internet as a way to save the industry. We kind of all know how that went, but it was an exciting time at the moment when we thought that was going to happen. But, the rise of technology, and I think, one of the things that keeps me passionate about my career is that I get bored easily, so I'm always looking for what's next, and able to follow some interesting things. And I think I really first got a sense of what was going to be possible in the late 90s. I was fortunate enough to join MTV as the head of their experimental programming team, which was a brand new team. My title was executive producer of Convergence. That's a 90s title, if there ever was one.
Convergence. I think that's a sci-fi title somewhere.
It felt like sci-fi at the time, but I had the opportunity to develop the world's first game show that was designed specifically for home play on your computer. So this was real bare bones technology, sending out signals in the vertical blanking interval of the video feed itself that a computer listening to the feed could pick up and stay in time with questions during a game show. It was, in some ways, it was the lowest high tech that was possible at the time.
Yeah.
But the fact that it worked and the thrill, I will never forget this. The night that we tested this, the show was called Web Riot. It aired on MTV during the week, early evening, right after TRL, which was Total Request Live, which was the biggest thing going at the time with Carson Daly. And we did a test at 2 a.m. and I walked out of our offices in Times Square at about 4 o'clock, going to the all-night Howard Johnson's, which was still open then. And I felt like I owned the world. Because I'd done something with a core group of people that were my compatriots in a year's worth of work that nobody had ever done before.
Yeah.
And the thrill of that, it's funny, it wasn't an ego building thrill. It was a hunger building thrill. I said, I got to find more of this. Where does this come from? How do I tap into this bucket over and over again? And that's kind of, what's driven me all along. And I ended up kind of getting bored with the cable TV business in the 2000s. A lot of stagnation, especially on the digital side of things. And I was working for the Independent Film Channel and AMC at the time as head of their digital team. And we launched Mad Men. And somebody said to me, I think you would like the agency life. I thought, that's not me. That's not me. But then I realized what the agency life meant was I could meet a lot of great clients like yourself. I could have a lot of great challenges come from those people, and the variety would be infinite. So I landed at Ogilvy and ended up being fortunate enough to be in a position to start content teams, technology teams, push the agency, and an agency like Ogilvy with decades and decades of history, to be able to push them into places where they hadn't gone before was fantastic. And, probably the most rewarding project that I worked on there was IBM's A Boy and His Atom, which was a stop motion animation film. Our creative team came up with a fantastic idea to actually shoot stop motion of atoms, shoot it through a microscope and manipulate the atoms one by one. The concept of it was fantastic. The strategy around it was a wide open canvas for us because the client just said, go find as many people as you can who would want to watch this. So we tried many different ways to reach a variety of audiences that normally wouldn't lean into content from IBM. And it remains the most viewed piece of IBM content in the world. But again, kind of like that moment, right? I mean, not a bad thing to have.
No, not at all.
But, hearkening back to that 4 a.m. moment in Times Square, we were having a drink after it launched, and the video just did great coming out of the gate. And we started getting tweets about it from celebrities who were watching it. And if you remember, now I'm blanking on the actress's name who played Winnie Cooper on the Wonder Years, the girlfriend.
Oh, yeah. She kind of disappeared, right? For a long time. I don't know. Yeah. Good question. Audience, listeners, feel free to send me a note.
Send it in, but she's a mathematician. She's a scientist. And she tweeted how much she liked it. And I said, well, that's it right there. Winnie Cooper approves of our work. I don't need anything else.
Yeah. The power of influencers, even then, man, it's astounding.
Even then. And that's all of those kinds of things that we did. I mean, that was like, 2015, 2016.
Yes.
That was all done with pretty much, core internet technology. But then things started to get really exciting. And where we're at now, I look at the years between advances from that era, and it's like those advances are happening in months, if not weeks.
Well, for sure. Yeah,
And
for sure now.
the possibilities right now, I think, like, boy, we did this 10 or 15 years ago. And I'm like, well, yeah, now just pretty much anybody could do that at home.
Well, yeah.
And I love it.
I saw a video yesterday on LinkedIn. I was just scrolling, and anytime I see the name Ethan Mollick, I stop. And as much as I name drop Mr. Mollick, I still have never received a love note. But I really admire everything that he does. He's a genius, and his book is tremendous. Co-intelligence. It's just delightful. Anyway, I saw this post by Ethan, and he was just showing that I think a diffusion model or something, just some generative AI was able to essentially recreate Doom, the game Doom, right now with on just a normal chip's processing power in your own PC without ever having played Doom. And we're talking classic, like the original, maybe whatever it is, not 4-bit or 8-bit, but 16-bit or, one of the kind of lower res versions, but it was Doom. And in fact, I was watching the little video on LinkedIn, and I even got the same motion sickness that I used to get while playing Doom. And if anybody out there, the first OG first person shooter, Doom. And, that's him, a college professor, not a game designer. Not somebody with a team of developers, and that's where we are now. And we'll bridge that gap, I think, as we kind of have this conversation, Rob. But, you just bring to mind that there's this acceleration of change that is far beyond even Moore's law, I think, right? It's just, and Moore's law is the what is it? Technology doubles, chip size is reduced by half every certain number of years or something. You probably know it much like word for word, but Moore's law is nothing. I mean, this is the rate of acceleration is, they're going to need a new term for it. So where are we now? Like, what's going on?
Well, I mean, it's funny to that point, right? What you just said taps into, I think, one of the biggest challenges we have now, where the rate of acceleration is so fast that if you're not leaning into it every day, if you're not one of the obsessed, it's very hard to keep up. So you saw this AI recreation of Doom. That's fantastic, right? I would say that most people I talk to are still in the, AI, that's the thing that creates guitar players with 7 fingers in a JPEG, right? And it's like, yeah, you know what, yeah.
Or even worse, I was reading Jeannie Dietrich's work the other day. Do you know Jeannie? She runs SpinSucks, and she's the inventor of the peso model. And she posted something last week at the time of this recording about just like a regular blog post or short article about AI in the PR profession and the comms profession. And she was pointing out that I think two or three magazines, PRWeek and PR Daily and maybe Reagan or something, I forgot. But they were comparing LLMs, like just the large language models, and kind of giving like a grade or like a report card on what they were getting. And what they were doing was write a press release. And the AI, of course, would write a press release or do this. And then would say, yeah, okay, this, ChatGPT did good on this, and Claude was all right, and Gemini didn't do whatever it was for each different task. Now, these are professionals and leaders in the PR and communications world. They're saying, we asked ChatGPT write a press release. And that's what happened. Now, maybe it's because I'm so steeped in this. Two long years into, not even 2 years into the dawn of this whole age, that even I looked at this and said, that's not a prompt. Like, what's the basis of this comparison? Because if I was just going to type in, write me a press release, what would I get? I'd get some generic garbage, right? I'd get an outline and a framework and something like, hey, here's what a press release should look like. And I might go, if I was a beginner in PR, or if I was like even somewhat seasoned who never even looked at AI or anything and who just want to save some time thinking about writing, I'd be like, oh, this is a handy template. But Jeannie pointed out, it's like, these people don't know how to prompt, right? And she said it much nicer than I just said it. But prompting has been to me, it's just been second nature, right? I just fell into the whole idea of, wait a second, you mean I can talk to this thing? And, I like to talk. So it's a natural fit. But so like, never mind creating a doom game, like you just said, most people still, they sit down, and if they open one of the LLMs, it's probably ChatGPT. And if they open ChatGPT, they're just like, how do I do XYZ? How do I make a cup of coffee? How do I bake a cherry pie? And then they get some answer and they're like, this is fun. And they walk away. So, I think the state of affairs is the acceleration is moving so fast, but there's like a layer. There's like this kind of like, if I'm picturing it in my mind, it's like an oleat, and it's like an oil layer on top of this kind of fast current. And that layer are people who are, okay, they're in the river, they're in the right place, but they're just sort of staying still while all this stuff is going on beneath them. I mean, good for them, they're in the river, but really, there's this stratification happening. And I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, I feel like I'm well under the current, but not too deep. I don't know. What are you thinking about all this stuff? I'm throwing a lot at you, Rob.
You are, but you're tapping into a topic that I think is greatly underappreciated, and something that I end up talking to partners and colleagues about quite a bit, which is the power of the prompt, right? And to what you're pointing out, you can go to ChatGPT the first time, and you're probably going to treat it like this is a fortune-telling arcade game, Zoltar, right? You're going to ask it a question, and you're going to get an answer. And as you said, you say, oh, that's cool, and you're going to walk away without realizing that you can start a chain of prompts that's going to develop something much deeper than that, right? So that understanding that is number one. The other piece that I find is a mental hurdle, especially for people who've been involved in digital product, maybe not in digital product development, so where they've been selling in things, is they kind of bring an app mindset to it, right? So if we go back 5 or 6 years, got to develop an app. Okay, whatever you want your app to do, you're going to make a bespoke app that does it. Understanding that LLMs don't work that way is a leap, right? Understanding that's actually, it's the training and the prompt. It's not the LLM necessarily that you need to work on, right? So if I have 5 things I want to do, I don't need 5 LLMs. I need the right prompts to make it do that, right? And what's interesting, I have a friend that I worked with at Ogilvy, who's a fantastic young creative technologist. And he's got some friends who have started a cottage industry of canned prompt writing. I mean, what a great idea, right? I don't know if that's something that's going to have a 5 or 10 year timeline before the horizon burns out on it. But right now, that is such the key. If you're working with companies, say like, we have these systems, we invested in enterprise AI systems, but they're not doing what we want. Well, it's probably because you're not asking it the right way. Well, assuming that it's been trained properly. Let's assume the data's in there, right?
Right.
And this idea of, canned prompts to me harkens back 15, 20 years ago to good interface design. It's just not visual, but it's like, how do you get the most out of the experience, right? And the way that we get the most out of this experience is understanding how to coax it out.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of skill set.
Well, I mean, I would argue that that's a skill set that's really, really based in the idea of curiosity and being inquisitive and understanding how to interrogate and ask questions, which is something that our profession is particularly good at.
Yes.
Which should be giving us a real leg up, but back to something, you're talking about there with prompting and, these canned prompts. Like, I agree. I mean, the time horizon, the freshness of that, the shelf life, as it were, is not that long. I mean, but it's not too short either. It's going to be a couple of years, and gradually different apps and different software are just throwing in what Mark Schaefer has called the button. Just You don't have to really know anything about AI. AI is coming to you.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, they're failing. Like they're not doing that great. Like Copilot's kind of not doing all that wonderfully. It's not as world changing and life changing as Microsoft was hoping all of the users of Office Suite would want. I'm fairly sure they're going to get it right, but it's going to take time. But in the meantime, the LLMs are the way to go. And not having the app mentality is I think ingenious. You definitely can't have that mindset. But on the other hand, at the same time, if you think that every prompt I use is essentially creating a new app,
mm-hmm.
and then you treat that particular instance of chat as your app, right? Then it's fascinating, because then you're like, okay, I'm now like creating a creation engine, or I'm creating something that I'm working with something that is now tailored to do something that is, like a low code, no code. It's what I want it to do. And that's also a fairly eye-opening and new way of looking at the software experience.
Well, it's a level of creativity that has been missing in the traditional ways to interface with computer models, right? You are creating every prompt you write, no matter how basic or complex it is, you are creating something. And I think that's part of the adrenaline rush for me is, okay, I created my prompt, I got my answer. Maybe I went through a chain of prompts, I got better and better and better answers. But now, what am I tweaking? What variables am I throwing out? What do I keep? What do I toss out? That's creative thinking on a level that most people don't get to do. And it's therefore the price of opening your browser.
Yeah.
That is
exactly.
like the power of that. I think as more and more people understand and get over the, the press is going to take the bad parts, the failings, and make stories out of that. And that's what most of the public's going to hear. As you get the experience and start to work with it and say, like, well, it's really not that hard to take the extra steps yourself and make something more of the tools we have. And I think that's, another part of what, I tend to talk to partners about quite a bit is we don't have to wait. Right? Yeah. We can do more than we can possibly imagine right now, and it's only going to get better. But we don't have to wait for the next piece. We can revolutionize almost everything that we're doing right now.
Yeah. I mean, if we narrow it and if we keep it even within the traditional area of what we do, a lot of writing, a lot of creative work, content development, strategy. It's the perfect partner tool. Like there's no tool that's ever been created that's better. And I wouldn't even call it a tool. And I don't. I usually call it my partner or my intern. But it is so evolutionary and revolutionary. And it's astounding to me that this is not, that people aren't really jumping deep into it. I mean, some of us are, and we're looked at as crazy people. Or if we're unfortunate, we're in an organization that just doesn't see the value of putting time into it. And if we're very fortunate, then, we get to be the chief digital innovation officer of a major agency. The point is that we're all sharing this like, hey, don't you see what I'm seeing here? Like, what the hell? To like think about this, and I was just going to say that, just by way of an example, I'm building a business, and I have been, I've been working on and off with different forms of AI and just using it fairly regularly. But I took a little bit of a break for a while because I was, focused on some things happening at my previous job. But even jumping right back into it, I'm jumping right back in. But now I noticed that the custom GPT world has exploded, right? Just exploded. And, rather than knock your head against a wall and concuss yourself with all the frustration of, hey, you need to adopt this, there's like a showcase of case studies use cases and, prompts that, you can't necessarily see them because they're behind the custom GPT, but that's what they're doing, that can hit almost any function or any task that you need in a way that may or may not fit your specific or precise needs. But when you see one of those custom GPTs, the other thought that should occur is, well, I can do it then. Like if somebody's done that, then I can do it too. There's certainly people who are using real serious code and doing crazy stuff in there. But for the most basic things that we do, it's completely achievable.
It is. And it's an interesting point because, and I'm sure you have the same experience, vendors come out of the woodwork looking to show you their latest product. And so much of what I'm seeing right now really is just custom GPTs.
Yeah.
Hiding behind a veil. And
that's all it is.
Bless them. A lot of these companies are getting paid very handsomely for the tools because they're selling them to people who don't really understand what they are. And I'm looking at this thinking, and this is not great for the vendor's business, but wow, for one or two of those, I could have a couple of creative technologists and make 50 for the same money, right? And that, again, it's that freeing aspect that all you have to really do is think. And I love that. The hurdles, I mean, to your point, yes, there are people who are experts in code and doing amazing things that, most of us will not do with the tools. But for the most part, you can jump in and build things that will revolutionize the way that you're working. And I'm very fortunate, and I'll give a little bit of a plug to our parent company, our holding company, Publicis Group, because amongst the investments that Publicis has made in AI that have gotten all the headlines, they've also gone out and built an enterprise sandbox where all of us have a place to play. And to be able to experiment in a safe zone and push boundaries without worrying about all the other things that we worry about when we're on a public system has been elevating. That's the best way I can put it, right? And I feel fortunate that my teams get to use that sort of safe space.
Good for you, and good on Publicis Group. It's funny. I was creating a GPT the other day just to try to figure out how to build a newsletter myself, basically. And there's a story there, but what occurred to me as I was creating this thing was, okay, I created it and then I hit the, go to the GPT. So, which is basically like publishing it, but you can set it to publish only for you or for everybody else to see. And I had that moment of panic, like, crap, did I forget to BCC everybody on this? Or, did I copy everyone or send too soon, whatever, like it's the equivalent of one of those. But then I realized, oh, no, I did it right. But it's not, the need to have your own private space, your own kind of free experimental area is, I think it can't be underestimated for companies and for brands that have a lot at stake. Now, speaking of this capability that companies should be having, and like, I love the fact that agencies are jumping on it, and in the Publicis Group for sure. But some of the other agencies that I've spoken to, they're not sitting around waiting for shit to happen. They are doing everything they can, hiring all kinds of, or hired all sorts of incredible digital people, some of whom are your friends and my friends. It's like, this is a really interesting community of people. So they're not sitting around. However, the clients are, right? And it's to a degree, and I'm not asking you to speak ill will of any of your clients, believe me. But when I say the clients, I mean brands in general. So brands, companies in general, they're sitting around, or they're stalled, or they're not making any progress, or they just don't see the value, or like fill in the blank of why they're not doing it. And, I think about comms teams in particular, that what's the excuse that comms teams have for not pushing forward? There's certainly, there's a manpower issue perhaps in some places, but I kind of have this feeling, and some based on experience, that the report line for a comms team or a comms leader in an organization, to the CEO, hopefully, but sometimes it's to the CCO or CHRO or CMO. There's there's layers and there's a revenue pressure and there's all kinds of things where basically it's down to a budget, it's down to getting the organizational priorities straightened out, all important. So they tend to be risk adverse and, put their money in more traditional buckets rather than just take a step back, ask the right questions, and be brave enough to tell the leadership what they think, and then reallocate funds to where it matters. Let me kind of bring that down to a visual level, or to a kind of to an example. Like look at media relations, and look at the efforts that we make on media relations, which is traditionally the bread and butter of most corporate PR teams, for sure, and definitely a lot of agencies. I mean, media relations, I'm not saying it's a non-starter, it's dead, but it's different than it's ever been. And if you can figure out what that difference is and approach media that way, then all power to you. But most aren't. Most are still looking for that, what I'm taking to call the media high hit, or the media hit high. Sorry, the media hit high. You get that media hit, you're like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. And I'm like, well, it doesn't beat creating the world's first interactive TV video game, but but sure, you get an instant gratification from that. You see your company's name in the New York Times. Doesn't do anything for your business, right? Without a sustained message and story that's also reaching those same people, it's just in and out. And there's a vanity hit, but there's no real benefit from that. So if you're taking your money and you want to get return on that money, why are you putting it there? Well, you're putting it there because it's a legacy and it's what you always did. And okay, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. But rather, why isn't it moving to, for example, to AI or to other ComTech related enterprises where, yeah, maybe it's a little investment in time and, will take a little bit of implementation time. It will take retraining and it will take some rethinking of the team. But that's a short-term pain, because very shortly after you really embrace these things, you've got, multiples of productivity and efficiency and cost savings. I mean, to me, it just seems like the right thing to do. So I don't know. I'll get off the soapbox. What are you seeing in this whole, the way that money's moving around and how you're advising clients and what you're seeing across the industry or from your own experience, doesn't have to be from your clients? What's your thought on that?
I think what we're seeing, and this relates exactly to what you were saying, is, where are the things that will make anybody on any side of the fence, client or not, sit up and go, oh, this is why I have to pay attention to it. And one of the interesting artifacts of the last 18 months of the Gen AI age that has been a conversation changer. There's this notion that I always share that it doesn't matter whether or not you want to change because of AI. AI is going to change your business. That's just, It's going to happen. Whether you want to play an active role in it or not doesn't matter in the outcome. It's going to happen. And one of the areas where it's easier for brands to see this is when we start looking at what's happening with the AI search algorithms and with platforms like Gemini and Perplexity, where they can say, oh, wait a minute now. Why is a startup more influential to the algorithm than I am? Why is a YouTube video more influential than a TikTok video? Why am I not being included in this conversation anymore? And, it's a familiar thing because it harkens back to, why am I not number one on Google, right? So there's that familiar spark of, oh, is this kind of like SEO? And then when they realize, actually, it's not kind of like SEO, it's much deeper. And it's about your storytelling, not about your keywords. And it's about your relevance and your authority. That's one of those moments where I think people who have not been following what's happening closely start to understand, okay, this is no longer about how digital technology is organizing content and where my brand fits in or my product fits in. This is about technology that is writing the story of the future And it's almost as if, to use the media analogy, it's almost as if a reporter is writing a story about, a company's vertical and never called that company for an interview. They're not going to be they're not there. They're not in the story, right? So if you're not at least starting to influence what's happening with training of the major public models in terms of the content you're publishing, in terms of your authority and relevance, it's just like never getting the call from the reporter. And I think that's something that brands understand, right? That is easy to say, okay, I see what's happening. Now, making the jump from I need to straighten this out to I actually need to bring these tools in-house and start to use them for my outbound content, it's a leap, but at least it's a leap then that's based on something familiar.
Yeah. And the other side of it is, the brands that know, but, and people are paying attention, but it's not enough of a size. There's not enough of an audience there yet to move the revenue needle for the bigger companies, especially for large corporations. So it's backburnered, it's like, okay, yes, I see that's happening. I understand that we've got to get ahead and think about like what kind of content we need to be publishing or how we're going to structure our websites to make it easier for the LLMs to see and to understand. But that sounds like a big project. So, we're going to stick with our SEO because it's still important. So we're just going to stick with that and we'll get to it later. But now challenger brands are already getting to it. And some of the forward-thinking big companies certainly are. But I think the vast majority of companies out there aren't even thinking about it, especially in the mid-market and in the kind of, legacy department. The opportunity is tremendous. The cost of creating new content is time, really, for a lot of these companies. It's time because, generally you could do it gradually and you could do it, a lot of it in-house because it's your web pages and it's the content that you're publishing. And if you're already working with agencies, then your agencies can help. But it just seems so daunting. It's like people who procrastinate because a project is too hard to start. So what's going to happen is that it's at some point, there's going to be a holy shit aha moment. And brands are going to be like, wait, what happened? We were, and then by that point, what they had known about optimizing for LLMs will already be obsolete, and they'll be stuck at that kind of top level of the river when the current has already flown so far beneath them that it's going to be expensive and time consuming and hard to make the changes they need to make.
Without a doubt. And a great example of that, I know you and I are both fans of Perplexity.
Yes.
And one of the things I love about Perplexity is that it will share with you the video, text, and image links that it's using to create its answers, right? So much more transparent than most of the other platforms. And I noticed Boar's Head, not one of my clients, we all know what Boar's Head has been going through over the last couple of months. Perplexity had been favoring, this was a couple of weeks ago, I don't know what the situation is right now, had been favoring a 2-year-old FAQ page over the current crisis management website page that Boar's Head had been pushing. And something I've observed with Perplexity and the other engines is that they very much lean into Q&A kind of content, right?
Yes.
Like it doesn't have to be literally an old school FAQ, but they lean into that Q&A. And it makes so much sense when you think about how the models work, right? When prompt and answer, query and answer, content that's query and answer is going to have a great impact on the models. So I thought it was really fascinating to see in that one Boar's Head case, that 1 week in the middle of August, that format was actually, at least seemed to be, dictating relevance over content.
I also wonder two things about that. I haven't seen the content, so I don't know, but was the content that was written 2 years ago more conversational than the current content?
Absolutely.
Did it seem like it was more accessible to the human because that's just because whatever model's system prompt you're using will stress that in different ways. Like these are the kind of what's below the surface, what people don't understand, and what Ethan Mollick points out, and what I've seen pointed out again and again, is that fundamentally the models want to make you happy. They want to please you, but they don't know what they're saying. They don't understand what it's looking at. They're creating patterns based on patterns that they already know or have learned. It's the world's largest pattern matching machine. And to way oversimplify, but it wants to make you happy. So if it thinks that a certain content sounds more personable, more happy, more relevant, it's going to go with that one, regardless of the time frame. So they're not going to favor recency. In other words, they're going to favor conversational relevance, and that is a massive game changer. Like, the algorithm doesn't value recency in an LLM,
not in the same way that we're used to, right? And the amazing thing about that too is that it changes the nature of authority, right? So if I said to you a couple of years ago, you need to have the most authoritative content, a brand might respond with science and with very heady content. But now authority matters. The impact of the consumer and who's clicking on what and how that's starting to influence the algorithms. The judge of authority is the consumer. So if the content, to your point, is not appealing to the consumer, is not in their vernacular, is not something that they feel ready to consume, they're not going to interact with it. And it is not going to get that algorithmic imprimatur of authoritative. So you start to, it's easy for a brand to actually communicate itself out of the conversation, which is a really fascinating concept, that you can talk your way out of relevance.
Yeah, especially if you're like looking at things like Perplexity or like the LLMs, which still is only, in all fairness, a small sliver of the audience population, but it's an influential sliver, and it's the one that's journalists are looking at it, and influencers are looking at it, and if you might say, well, only 10% of the people are only 1% of people are looking at Perplexity or whatever, but you know what? That's not a stat you should be thinking about in terms of your message.
No, it's the future. And, as Google has rolled out SGE and the subsequent versions of that, right, more and more people are seeing it. So, the idea that even search, which we used to know exactly how to manipulate, whether it was organically or paid, now has a narrative story that may take up the entire screen before we get to that oh so valuable first listing or SEM post. The whole game has changed. And, to tie in with something you were saying before, we're talking about now, how AI has affected discoverability. But because those changes in discoverability are putting a pressure on creating more relevant, more authoritative content, that comes right back around to what you were saying a few minutes ago with, why are we not using AI with human editorial? Why are we not using that to create more of the content that is going to influence us? So we're feeding the cycle rather than potentially becoming a victim of it.
There's always these cycles that happen in communications and marketing, and where, where is the power in the relationship? So, is the power of influence with media? Is the power of influence with celebrities? Is it with the consumer? And it's a combination of all these things, and we know that. But there's this underlying kind of continuous kind of trajectory north in the power of the end user and the consumer. And, people marveled at the internet at first because it's a great way to get messages to people. But then then they realized, wait a second, when Web 2, especially when Web 2.0 started to happen, wait, people are taking their own control and they're telling each other what to buy. Wait, this is not fair. And now that's just keeps accelerating. And now we have more and more power in the hands of the consumer. But because the consumer is now or the customer, the consumer client is getting more and more answers from AI, from generative AI. Well, now that puts a little bit more power in the hands of the brands, doesn't it? Because the brands or the publishers are now in a position, should they wish to grab it, to really double down on becoming a publishing house, creating the right kind of content, not volume and not well, frequency is important, but not necessarily volumes of content, but the right kind of content, so that they can then start to really take more of control of their own story, right? They're not going to control the consumer, but to control their story, because they're not leaving it to media anymore. Less and less and less and less. That was one of the other stats I saw was that the number of times that media says, or that there's an article says, company X could not be reached for comment, has something like quadrupled or quintupled in the last 5 years or something. Like, people aren't, we don't want to talk to the media. So who are we talking to? We're talking to each other, talk to our customers, take the money, take the budget, focus it on that. And it astounds me that that's not happening the way it probably should be happening.
It astounds me too. And that legacy middleman communications philosophy lingers. And, one of the things, Dan, you and I have talked about this. It's something I've been saying to clients for 15 years, right? There's data out there that will tell you exactly what you need to say to your customer. And it could be as simple as doing getting a thorough understanding of what happens when it's 10:30 at night. It's your customer, it's your consumer. They have a problem. They turn to Google. Whatever they type in the dialog box is exactly what the brand needs to talk about. They don't need to talk about their latest tagline. They don't need to talk about whatever they decided to hype at the quarterly meeting. They need to talk about what is getting typed in that box in the same vernacular that the customer is using. If you could just do that simple thing, you can short circuit the need for all the third-party communication, because you're going directly to the need. No guesswork.
And
those
tools are readily available.
Absolutely.
They're readily available. And, I know you can name a dozen of them. And in fact, I just got pitched today because, like I said, I started their own business, and now people are coming to me, and vendors, a lot of software creators and vendors are starting to reach out and try to get me interested in their products, because, as I go and see other professionals and clients, I want to have options, right? So, what agencies do. But a lot of these tools are fantastic. They really are. There's great stuff, and you can absolutely be ahead of the game by conducting just the smallest modicum of research. I mean, it's incredible. The excuses that companies have to not be their own publishers are fading fast, and they need. I think embracing AI is part of it. Embracing the right kind of tech stack is another part of it. But for corp comms and brand comms like Marcom, these people who are responsible for getting messages in front of people, right? The struggle is real, but there's a lot more that they can do. Anyway, we can get into that, but I wanted to ask you, because I realized that we're starting to come up on it, but as somebody who has been in the field, in the industry for quite some time, and oversees, roughly a gajillion people, there are career paths that we've always thought about. And I'm not bringing this up because it's a random question. I'm bringing it up because it keeps popping up in my show. And, people have talked about it. I want to get your take on this. With the advent of AI, I think of Gen AI, and with people like you, Rob, and the kinds of ways we're looking at using it, it's easy to jump to a conclusion that, well, if it can do all those things, that we don't need as many people, or we don't need as many young people, or we don't need as many inexperienced people, or, film, whatever that may be. I've heard very different takes on this. Very curious to know where your head is at, what you think the employee of the now and the near future needs to be like, and like, what does that look like? It does change career paths. There's a lot to unpack, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is changing career paths, and it's definitely changing, I think, what we're looking for people entering the beginning of their career. I have never been in the Chicken Little mindset that AI is coming for everybody's jobs, but I do believe it's coming for people who do not embrace it. Right. Those are the people in danger first. Right. And that's not a unique thought. I think a lot of us identified that early on, that embracing it is what's going to make you more valuable in the near term. But as we find efficiencies, right, one of the things that excites me the most is if you don't need as many people in one area, if you could have, and I'm not going to get into specifics because I don't want to scare anybody, but if you have 10 people in one group and AI helps you do that same job with 7 people, right? Do you say, okay, that's great, I saved 3 heads? Or do you say, wow, that allows me to hire 3 different kinds of talent that I haven't been able to hire before that are actually going to drive the business in a whole new direction? And maybe those people are not the ones who have learned to use AI tools of the day in their 9 to 5 life, or their 8 to midnight life, or whatever it may be. But maybe those are the people who are looking 2 years down the road. And maybe now we have more of an opportunity to bring that kind of talent on. So, we're always, I think it's the nature of the economy. It's the nature of the version of capitalism that we're in, that anything that shrinks the labor force is something that's seen as good in many, many, many circles. Maybe I'm a little bit too much of an optimist, but I see it as actually an opportunity to reshape the labor force in a way that's going to drive us further. And, it's probably no different than it was during the Industrial Revolution, right? When things change. One of the analogies I use all the time is, not to be too esoteric, but in the 1790s, if you were a very successful canal company, right, you didn't realize in 30 years that your industry was going to be virtually kaput because of technology, right? But as you grow your business, and as a smart business person says, you know what, I'm maybe not going to need as many mules next year, but I sure do need somebody who can build a locomotive. Right? That, I think, is the kind of environment that we're in right now. It's if you're going in with eyes open and you're looking at growth and you want to grow your business. I'm not talking about trying to whittle down and maximize profits out of where you're at now, but actually grow your business. AI can help shape the workforce and allow you to do that.
It's really fascinating to talk to people. It's fascinating to talk to people who approach this from a fixed mind, zero-sum game and then talk to somebody who has a more of an abundance mentality. And it's not binary, but I love your kind of abundance mentality approach here, Rob, because I feel the same way in a lot of situations. And with the way things are right now, people are making proclamations and sometimes life-altering, meaning job-altering decisions based on the past, which means everything up to this moment. You're looking at the way things are now, and you're saying, there's no role for a media relations specialist anymore. So I'm screwed, or so I might as well just give up. Or if you're running a company that has media relations specialists, you might say, we can, like you said, we can cut heads. But on the other hand, we don't know what's going to happen in a couple of days or a couple of years or a couple of months or whatever. But one thing we do know is that there's a lot we don't know. And therefore, doesn't it follow that we're only seeing, if we're seeing AI through the lens of the past, we're not seeing, or all the other technologies that are converging as well. We haven't even touched on, on the Web3 and metaverse stuff, which people think is dead, but not at all. Not even a little bit. It's not just even. that's another conversation for another time. But the roles that are going to be created, the tasks that are going to be created, to channel Johnny Wada for a second, are very different. It's going to create a whole, bundle of new tasks. Those new tasks will have to be apportioned to somebody, which become new jobs. Also, what we can create changes. It's changing. I mean, the fact that I can sit there and, design poorly, but still design a physical product using a combination of a conversation with any one of the LLMs and then a Midjourney prompt. Like, no wonder people are like, wouldn't it be great if I had a new water bottle that could do this, and that? And I'm saying these random things because they're on my desk, but you're seeing upstart inventors and upstart designers. The same thing's going to happen inside brands and companies, I think, like where, those who have their eyes open, and leadership of those organizations, if they have their eyes open, they should be encouraging that kind of innovation, at least for part of the time, people's jobs.
Without a doubt. If I was running a brand that made physical product right now, I would have a team of creative technologists that are skilled in AI, in 3D printing, and soldering. And those three skills alone can invent the future.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's true. And I would put maybe CAD rendering on there.
CAD rendering for sure. Well, you need that if you're going to print anything, right?
But it's true. Because like I said, I was just alluding to something. Like I was I was designing something very poorly, and I was like, well, give me a CAD rendering. And I don't know what I don't know how to operate CAD, like CAD at all, or is that even the right way to say that? I don't know. But I do know that it couldn't give me a good CAD rendering. I've seen renderings before. It wasn't rendering. So there's still some progress that needs to be made, or I have to change my prompt. But in any case, the fact that I'm even thinking of doing that is ridiculous.
Right?
It's nuts.
Absolutely.
I created a whole brand identity, right? With no designers, with zero designers. Now you can make a judgment call, or you can take an objective look at it and say, oh, it sucks, or it's this way or that way, and make your own, have your own opinion. But it's an identity, right? That I couldn't have done two years ago without spending a fortune. So, like, just in-house, if you can think about like your in-house future as a communicator, as a marketer, your in-house future, your path as a agency, professional. I don't know, man. I think it's just wide open. I mean, there's so much you can do as long as you have an environment.
Sky is the limit. And to your point, a couple of minutes ago, Dan, we've spent an hour talking mostly about generative AI, did not touch on the current state of NFTs and metaverse. The return of near field communication out of the blue, it seems, 5-6 years ago, hot thing, kind of went cold, very much not a cold thing anymore, quite hot, especially with what's going on in the EU right now. Maybe that word that we started with from the 90s, convergence, maybe it's going to make a comeback.
Yeah.
Maybe the next kid coming out of college will be the next executive producer of Convergence somewhere.
Or maybe we change, we add a C to your title, the Chief Innovation and Digital Convergence Officer. There's so much there. It's just, I mean, I'll take it. The C is a good number.
I'm all for that. Since we don't do printed business cards, I don't care if the title fits on it or not.
That's right. Man, I mean, I know, like, it's funny. We've been talking for an hour. I still feel like we've only scratched the surface of things, and I know that we can keep going. But sadly for me, for our listeners, and maybe joyously for you, it's time to wrap this up. But I wanted to just give you one last opportunity to, like, tell us all, in sort of a parting words type of way, what's the immediate thing that people should be aware of, or should be? You just mentioned near field communications, but what's keeping you up at night a little bit, in a good way or bad way? And any words of wisdom for the gathered masses?
Yeah, I mean, what keeps me up is wanting to make sure that the people that I work with, my colleagues, my clients, that we are all doing everything we can to maximize the new ways to connect with our audiences. Because as has been true since the beginning of the digital era, the audiences are out ahead of everybody else. They're doing the things that we need to lean into. We don't have to invent experiences for them. We have to capitalize on what they're doing and make it better. That's what keeps me up at night. But what helps me go to sleep is that I am entirely bullish on our ability to do that.
That's very optimistic. I mean, that's the other thing about us obsessives is, we tend to be hopefully more on the optimistic side, with conditionally optimistic, I'll say.
There's a dose of realism in all of it. There has to be.
We hope. Right? Well, listen, everybody, Rob Davis, look for him on LinkedIn, Robert John Davis. Robert, I think your LinkedIn there's a lot of Rob Davises out there.
Yeah, I'm Robert John.
Look for Robert John Davis, but it's Rob Davis on LinkedIn. Look for robertjohndavis.com. Great place to look for Rob's bio and for the things he's done, and more information. Check out MSL, Rob's agency. Amazing people. I'm a little biased because so many of my friends are there, as it happens in our industry. But yeah, definitely check out MSL Global. Look at some of Rob's work. Find a conference Rob is speaking at, and just go there. Rob, is there any other socials and stuff that you are active on that you'd like to tell the group about here?
From a professional sense, no. Okay. From my multiple hobbies, yes, but I don't want to go there.
Okay, I hear you. We do have a reputation to maintain, especially one for my esteemed colleague here, my esteemed friend, Rob Davis. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. And you got to come back again.
Would love it. Thank you so much, Dan. This has been so enjoyable.
Me too.
Thanks for taking the time to listen in on today's conversation. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe through the podcast player of your choice, share with your friends and colleagues, and leave me a review. 5 stars would be preferred, but it's up to you. Do you have ideas for future guests or you want to be on the show? Let me know at dan@trendingcommunicator.com. Thanks again for listening to the Trending Communicator.